Hey, welcome back. This video, this portion of the Oxy-Fuel video series is going to cover the actual cutting process. In a previous video, we looked at taking the torches from caps on the bottles to setting them up, checking for leaks, the whole 9 yards. We're going to focus on actual cutting techniques in this video right here. And one of the first things we're going to do, of course, is just light the torch. In the previous video, I went over the sequence for lighting the torch, but we're going to get into a little more detail on adjustment, hopefully get some better camera shots so you can really see those subtle details. We're going to try to get some close-up shots of the preheat flames and then the stinger for the oxygen. And I want you to be able to really see the subtle differences in that adjustment process between a neutral flame, slightly carburizing, which is too much acetylene or not enough oxygen, and an oxidizing flame, which are different. So we're going to go ahead, I'm going to light the torch, I'm going to position it so it's stationary. I've got another camera off site that will hopefully film that, and we'll see how it goes, but hopefully you can get a good look at what those flames look like. So I'm going to gear up, I'm going to light this bad boy. I'm going to open that up about a quarter turn, reach out, and strike. I'm going to open this up until the soot goes away. I'm going to get the flame roughly adjusted in. And I'm going to switch to the other camera. What we have right now is I got the torch in a stationary position to try to keep it on the close-up camera. I'm going to back the oxygen off until we get a big bright acetylene flame. Now that flame right now is not doing us any good, but again, if I back this down to where it's really light, I've got a lot of soot. I'm going to bring this up. I'm going to bring that flame up until I get a nice bright yellow flame, and that's hard to look at. And I'm trying to have the audio pick up, so bear with me. I'm going to open up the oxygen. As I open the oxygen up, my flame comes in. I've got a little soot from the low acetylene. Carburization, if you will. I'm going to just knock that off with the oxygen valve. Alright, now with a close-up camera, what I'm going to do is I'm going to back this off a bit. As I add oxygen, that outer cone will slowly diverge into the inner cone. Right now I have what's called a neutral flame. I have what, at least to me, in front of it, looks like kind of a sky blue. If I hit the oxygen lever, I still have an excess, so I'm going to give it a little bit more oxygen. And I'm going to adjust that until I don't have those large flames protruding. This is where I would want to do my cutting, right about here. Okay? If I continue to open the valve, I will get an excess of oxygen, and the flames will get very sharp and needle-like, and I will ultimately have an excess of oxygen. So this is what this looks like. They're a real pale, icy blue. Okay? That's too much oxygen. Again, this is not enough. And back to my neutral flame. I'm simply adding oxygen again to get here, which I don't want. Taking oxygen away to get here. Notice I am not adjusting the acetylene. I am allowing the acetylene pressure, which is set at 5 psi, to generate that nice yellow flame. So I'll switch back to that. Here, that's what we got. So again, I'm going to add the oxygen until the flame is just converged, just neutral, right there. Check it with my cut, give it just a whisper more oxygen until I don't have that large. That's what I want right there. That's where I want to do my cutting. Now when I press this lever, you can see the line that extends out through the center of the cut. That's the stinger. So again, that line is 4 inches or so long on this tip. That means I could be 4 inches away and still cut. I do not have to have the preheat flame, the small flames here, right on top of the steel. In fact, I don't want to. We'll demonstrate that when we start cutting. So that's how to adjust your flame. Okay? Shut it off. I'm going to kill the oxygen. I'm going to kill the acetylene. Let me reset the camera. So the adjustment process is pretty particular. I will tell you that I'm not a burner. That's a BIW term. We have welders, we have ship fitters, and we have burners. Okay, some people cut the steel, that's a burner. Some people fit the assembly together, that's a ship fitter, and some people weld, that's a welder. So I was a welder, I am not a burner. I can do really good quality cuts, but again, my preference, my personal take on the torch adjusting procedure may be different from what you've been taught. But ultimately, I want to adjust that until I have a neutral flame, and when I hit the oxygen lever, I still want to have a neutral flame. So that means I might have to have the oxygen adjusted a little bit differently during the preheat process than I have during the actual cutting process. But ultimately, we want to maintain that neutral flame. Now, one of the things that can happen if you're running low on either oxygen or fuel, you'll notice that that flame will actually change while you're cutting. And you may notice that you constantly have to keep adding oxygen or backing off the acetylene or some variation thereof to keep it adjusted. When that happens, there's two possibilities. One is that your tank is not open enough. If your acetylene tank is open just barely, beyond really where it's able to bleed the gas off, that may be an issue. So if you're noticing that problem and both of your tanks are full, you may open your acetylene another quarter of a turn. Again, I wait till the valves, I open the valve until the needle comes up indicating I have pressure, and then I give it a wrist turn more, about a half a turn. But for high volume cutting on thick material, you may need a little bit more than that. Keep that in mind. Also keep in mind that as the torch heats up, the tip gets hot, the diameters change on the tip. You may see a slight change in adjustment required just because as things heat up, things change. But that is the basic adjustment procedure. And again, we want to make sure that we have a neutral flame when we're cutting. So we'll set up some material, we'll do some cutting. All right, folks, what I'm going to do right now is we're going to talk about actually cutting. We'll do some close-up shots. You can probably see my ghetto camera set up over here off to the side. I do all the filming alone, so nobody likes me. All right, pity party over. The first step is making sure that you know how to operate the torch, make your adjustments, and then keep your hands away from them. It's really easy to get the torch set, and then when you start cutting, you find that your glove is hitting, particularly if you're a lefty. It's really common for lefties to get their glove on the oxygen line on this particular torch, at least. So you want to make sure that you can operate the torch in a manner that you don't make it, take it out of adjustment. In terms of cutting, you want to be stable, right? And there's no general rule for this, except that, you really need to support the torch with both hands. I'm going to actually take my hand in a karate chop. I'm going to let the torch rest. It's kind of in the knuckle of the first hand right here, although it's hard to see with the glove. And then I just lightly touch the torch right here. While I'm cutting, karate chop right here, that allows me to pivot the torch with my strong hand, and it also allows me to make subtle movements. So my hand is really resting on the outer palm right here, not on my fingertips. That allows me to pivot my hand, and I can pivot the torch separately. So if I have a line to follow, again, I can readily follow that line. The other option is to cut towards yourself. I prefer to start with the torch as far away as I can get it, and then simply very, very lightly, again, following the line, typically just slide the torch in. When I get to the end of the cut, I can just cut out, and then I can reset and I can remove. You're going to have to practice those techniques. You need some method of ensuring that the preheat flames stay above the work, The preheat flames should never be licking against the steel, okay? They need to be above the work. My general rule of thumb is whatever the length of the preheat flame is, typically a quarter to maybe 3/8 of an inch on real thick material, the torch should be at least that high above the material. But recognize that the stinger, the actual cutting part of the flame, when you press the oxygen lever, might be 4 or 5 inches long. So you don't have to be that close in order to actually make a cut. The cut quality will generally be better if you're closer, but if the preheat flames get against the top of the steel, you're simply going to add more heat than necessary, okay? So remember folks, it's not the preheat flame that's doing the cutting, it's the oxygen. We have a chemical reaction that takes place. When the steel is brought to the kindling temperature, which is the point at which it burns, that's why BIW calls people that use these burners. Once we get the steel to orange, roughly 1700 degrees, just for a ballpark, we hit the oxygen, a chemical reaction takes place that burns the steel. The oxygen stream pushes the dross that's created. It's not burning slag, sorry folks. Pushes that dross out of the way, and as long as we're cutting at a steady speed, that will continue to leave an open path behind us. If we travel too slow, or have the preheat flames too close, or I suppose too large, the material behind us that's hot will just get reheated. It'll get even hotter, and instead of the dross escaping, it will backfill and bridge the gap that we're trying to cut. And then the piece that we try to cut doesn't actually fall off on its own. It's also important in most cases, unless you're beveling, but in most cases it's important to keep the torch vertical. If I have the torch at an angle on the start of a cut, the angle will cause the torch to, while it may catch the top corner of the plate, it might miss the bottom corner of the plate. And when I finish, I find it's still hanging there because I never actually cut the bottom edge. If the torch goes through at an angle, hopefully you can see this on the camera like this, I may cut here, but again, I will not cut at the bottom. So we need to keep that vertical. Finally, I guess the last thing is just recognize that it's not easy. The difference between going too slow and too fast can be really subtle. But what I generally watch for is that orange preheated area right at the flame front, right at the tip. It needs to be there. It might not be more than a 64th of an inch wide, maybe a 32nd of an inch wide. If it starts getting wider than that, you're probably getting the area so hot that it is backfilling on you. And I'll try to demonstrate that today. But first, let's take a look at a couple of good cuts freehand. And when I say freehand, I mean I'm not following a line. I'm not holding the torch in midair at any point in time. So here we go. And I'm just going to kind of preheat the material here just a little bit. Get my hand rested. I'm not grabbing this. I'm just simply letting it rest. And then with my weight on my front leg, in this case, not my hand, I'm going to get that to the preheat temp, press the lever, and crowd it. Now, on that particular cut, the part fell clean. If I pick the steel up, again I have minimal dross on the back side. If I want to remove the dross, I will use the chipping hammer, not the torch. I'm going to make another cut. This time pay close attention to the start. I am not going to start with the torch out on the material. I don't want to send material back up into the tip. We'll talk about piercing cuts later, but for now, assume we're starting on the edge. I want to have the flame halfway on the material, halfway off the material. I'm going to get that tip, the corner in this case, slightly orange. I'm going to hit the oxygen stream. I might back up just slightly. I want to make sure that I cut the edge of the material. If I'm inboard even a little bit, then I may leave an uncut portion on the edge, the same as if I had the torch at an angle. So again, let's relight and make that cut. This time, pay close attention to the start. So again, just for demonstration purposes for the other camera, I'm going to have the torch halfway on, halfway off. I should see flame looking past it, okay? And that's how I'm going to start my cut. I'm not going to start my cut up on top of the steel. So here we go, on the edge. Halfway on, halfway off. Looks like I'm at the kindling temperature. Back up slightly, come in. Pay close attention to the height of the preheat flame. The preheat flames are not touching the steel. Notice that slight orange area around the front of the cut. That's what I'm watching. If I go too fast, that will go out. But again, right now, we're going to try to make a nice clean cut. And it fell. So again, 2 successful cuts so far. I'm going to reset, put a line on there to follow, and we'll make a few more cuts. What we're going to do now, as I'm getting ready, is we're going to make a couple of different cuts to try to demonstrate some of the basic principles. So we're going to cut too fast, we're going to cut too slow, we're going to have the preheat flames too close. The one thing I am not going to do is cut with the torch out of adjustment. I could spend all day long making subtle variations here. Let's just assume that you have the torch adjusted correctly. If your preheat flames are too much oxygen or too much acetylene, then that's a whole other issue in and of itself. You got to make sure that you're taking care of that. So we're going to make a cut on this material that's just too slow. I'm going to have the torch a little too hot. I'm going to travel a little too slow. We're going to see what happens. So the edge is quite liquid. I'm going to go in slow. I can see the steel bridging behind me. Again, I've got the torch harder than it needs to be. I'm traveling slower than I should. So the preheat flame is liquefying the surface and it is welding back together behind me. Okay, this is way too slow. Also, notice the orange area around the cut, how large it is. Okay, we do not want that. We want a tiny little orange front around the cut. Nothing more than that. So, let's stop the cut. If your part's glowing orange afterwards, folks, that's definitely a problem. You can see that this is still hot. It doesn't want to fall off. Again, that is also a problem. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to cool this. I'll be right back. So, just gave it a quick dunk so that the next cut starts normal. Again, that was way too slow. I'm going to still have the torch hot like I had it before, but I'm going to travel at a normal speed. Notice the difference between the orange area around the cut on this cut than the last cut. I'm going to start cutting as soon as it's red. Here we go. For that cutting edge, I have maybe a 64th of an inch, 15 to 20 thousandths of orange on the surface. That is it. That is a nice clean cut. Again, the area surrounding that did not turn red. Again, we had a nice clean cut. So that's the basics of Oxy-Fuel cutting. The cut edge should be, I'm going to bring this around for the camera, nice and smooth. Okay, so there's a typical cut edge. Again, that was freehand without a line, but again, the cut lines are vertical, and we did not melt the top in, okay, and we do not have a lot of dross hanging off the bottom. going to do in this next cut is I'm just going to simply travel too fast. Okay? We're going to lose that orange on the front, and the sparks are going to fly up behind us, hopefully not damage my camera. Again, the orange is there. I'm going to pull the trigger. I'm going to get faster and faster and faster. And I have a cut. I'm going to take a look at this. So I had a beautiful looking cut at the top, but the part never fell off. So the question is, what happened? Well, basically what happened is, as I continued to cut across, instead of the dross shooting out the bottom, it started to change. The angle started to change. So initially it was going straight down. As I got quicker and quicker and quicker, it came around backwards. Now I avoided going so quick that it shot up behind me, because I do have a camera that's only about, I don't know, 18, 20 inches away. I don't want to ruin it. But what you can see quite clearly, and I'll bring this around, is that while the cut looks like it made it through, when I turn it around, it did not actually go all the way through in the end. So I started off with a travel speed that was more correct. We can see right through, nice air. As I got quicker and quicker, and the dross started to go backwards, it started to fill in. And eventually, I went so fast that it never cut all the way through. Now that I've got the edge cleaned up, I'm going to make a cut at the edge. And hopefully we'll be able to see kind of what's going on as if it was a cross-sectional view. So, take a peek. Make one more cut. Notice how that edge is getting hotter and hotter. It's getting harder and harder to get the piece to fall. Okay? Again, heat will play against you. The dross was there, but it fell off easily. That's common during beveling. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is piercing cuts. I mentioned before that we made our cut on the edge of the material, and of course you can't always do that. So what happens if you have to pierce or puncture your way through? Let's take a look. The basic technique is going to involve starting the torch just like normal, but then I'm going to turn the torch at an angle so that when it punctures, it does not shoot material directly back up into the nozzle. It's going to shoot it in a safe direction. In this case, I've got a camera to be careful of, so I'm going to be mindful of that. But if I'm simply piercing a hole, I'm going to simply put that torch back a little bit further. So for argument's sake here, I'm just going to punch a hole in the edge. We'll see how it works. So if I have to pierce a hole, I'm going to go to where the hole needs to be. I'm going to get that part hot, preheat this a little bit. I need to get that spot up to the kindling temperature. And this will take a little while on 3/4 inch plate. Again, I could turn the torch up a little hotter, but that would make the cutting hotter. And now it looks like it's at the kindling temperature, so I'm going to angle the torch away and slowly puncture down through. And there I have my pierce, okay? So I'm through. At that stage of the game, if I needed to, I could take my chipping hammer and knock some of that dross off. Easier to do it with with two hands, so let's do that. There we go. Now I'm going to go back, now that I have a hole that I pierced through, I can continue to make my cut. Of course, if I was cutting something specific, I would be following a line with circle, triangle, whatever shape it is you want to cut. But again, that's the trick. Get the part hot, angle the torch, slowly apply the oxygen, and then punch through. Let's continue that cut. I'm going to go in the center of the cut, get one edge red, initiate a cut, and then work my way out. So for demonstration purposes, I just made a small hole. I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to go in the hole that already exists. I'm going to move out to the edge, initiate the cut, and then I'm going to take off and I'm going to cut my shape. I'll just cut a random shape. Again, on the edge, initiate my cut, come out. So square-ish, okay? That's the proper way to do a piercing cut. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of torch beveling. There's a couple of ways to do the beveling. One is to simply cut from the top edge. Again, at BIW, they would call this bevel over. The bevel will be on the top when we're done. The other method would be to cut on the bottom edge, and that might be called bevel under at BIW. Essentially what it is to me is, am I cutting on the top surface towards the edge of the plate, or am I actually cutting on the edge of the plate and cutting away from the top surface? I'll demonstrate both of those methods here. But essentially the idea is you have to cut a straight line and you've got to maintain your angles. Now there's a few things that you can do, a few tricks and tips. I won't cover every one of them in this video for time's sake. One thing I have here in the shop is I have wedges. I have them at 22.5 degrees. This one happens to be a 30-degree wedge, and I have them at 45 degrees. This wedge simply can be placed out in front of the cut, and it acts as a guide. So when I set this wedge down on the table and I'm looking at it, it gives me a visual guide in which to line my torch up. So here, with it out in front of me, I can angle that at that angle, which is approximately 30 degrees, and that will allow me to go ahead and do the cutting. Additionally, if you require a specific angle and you don't have something like that, a simple bevel square, that's what I call it, miter square, I would simply set this at the angle I want, place it on in front of me, and use that as an adjustment. There are a plethora of jigs and fixtures and things that you could either make or buy or purchase to help with this process, but again, I'm going to stick to the hand stuff for this video. All right, for the purposes of the long shot, and I apologize if I cut my head off, I readjusted the camera. I'm going to take this piece right here and I'm going to cut lengthwise. I'm going to rest the torch on my hand. I'm going to cut as far as I can. When I get to the end of the cut, I'm simply going to come out of the cut. At that point, I will reheat the corner that remains, come back down in, and again, continue that cut, making several attempts to travel the length of it. That's the method that I've always used. So we're going to go ahead and light up and let's see what happens. That's barely on. There we go. All right, again, I'm going to use that as a guide, a visual guide for that 30 degrees. Very, very simple method. It's effective and probably accurate enough for most work that you'd be doing. I want to make sure that I can travel straight down the length of the plate. In this case, my hose is kind of holding me up a little bit, so I'm going to turn it around and gain a little bit more freedom and movement. There we go. And I got the other camera right in my way, but we're going to do what we can do. There we go. Now what I'm doing is I'm following the line. I am staying on one edge of the line. I am not crossing it. So I'm going to travel off the cut. I came out of the cut because basically the hose was hitting me in the stomach. So I'm going to move this forward a little bit. I'm going to make another cut. Start out here, initiate the cut, come down, I'm going to blend it. I get to the end, I'm simply going to come out. I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to move this down. Normally I would move backwards, but I got stuff in my way. All right, let's take a peek at that. Not super consistent, I can see that from now, but we'll see what it looks like. Basically what I have is I have an edge now that has been beveled. I've got a little bit of dross on that plate. My last blend was off a little bit. I'm not going to make excuses, but I just got stuff in the way. I'm in my own way, and trying to talk and do this at the same time is not exactly the best thing for me. But basically, this is a serviceable beveled edge. Now, the other method that I spoke of was beveling the plate under. In that case, what we would do is we would make a line on the edge of the plate and then do the cutting so that we actually were cutting in the opposite direction. To demonstrate that, I've got to go ahead and add a line to it, so I'll do that and be right back. All right. What we have now is I've got a line down the edge of the plate. This would be a handy technique. You're doing this freehand if we desired a root face or a landing. The easiest way, I think, to do this is to have this vertical supported in a vise. I don't have a vise here. I'm not moving this setup for the camera. But also, I could simply balance this on the edge of the plate, except I've already beveled the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bevel under, which is what this technique is called. So I'm going to lay this down on this edge. Again, so I'm cutting underneath the bottom edge. I'm going to set my angle here for my torch so I can estimate that 30-degree angle to get started. And I'm going to actually make the cut on this side, traveling down that edge. I'm going to be beveling underneath. So when I'm traveling, I'm watching the white line. I don't want to remove the white line. I want to cut just under the white line. That white line would represent the 1/4 inch land or root face that I want to maintain. The trick is going to be maintaining the angle. Honestly, it's not something I'm terribly good at. I don't do this a lot. I can usually flip stuff around for practice plates in the school, but other areas you may not have that opportunity. So remember, a torch can be used in all positions. In fact, I'm going to turn around. I'm going to cut from this side. This will be a little easier. Yeah, we'll see. We're going to give it a go. We're going for it no matter what. Here we go. We're going to bevel this way. I'm on a weird side right here, trying to stay away from the cameras, but you know what? No fear in the welding shop, we're going for it. This is definitely more challenging. I'm really eyeballing the angle from here, folks. Well, if that came out good, it'll be a miracle, but I'm praying for miracles right now. All right, the bevel under technique is definitely more challenging. There's a reason why this is not the first choice for beveling. You just can't really see where you're going all that well. The other thing that you notice is that because the part I'm removing is typically less material, it gets hot. It didn't stop it from falling off and making a good cut, but let's see what the actual cut edge looks like. Wish me luck. Okay, right here. Whoa, looks pretty scary, right? We got a lot of dross on that edge, but that dross, believe it or not, should come off easily. I'm going to grab a chipping hammer. So this is what I was talking about with beveling, lots of dross. Well, let's check it out. Very light taps, very light touches. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that my bevel is perfect. It's not. It's a little bit rough. In particular, I'm going to use the excuse, this camera is really where I want to be. I did not want to cut from this side. But again, it is harder. It's going to take more practice. It's going to take more skill. I am a welder. I am not a burner. It's not something I do. I accept that if I personally am doing some beveling, particularly on the odd side, where I can't really get a good view because I'm trying to keep my head out of the way of the close-up camera shot, I'm going to have to do a little bit of grinding. But again, this is a perfectly serviceable, usable edge. I do have a nice straight land. I have that 1/4 inch land, and that's what I was intending to maintain. I'm back. Okay. What I have here is I have the old piece that we cut. It's a piece of scrap. I have a part measured off on this edge is 3 inches. That 3 inches is to this line. Now, ultimately, I marked this at 3 inches, and then I made a little mark at the top, and then I put the combination square over, and I marked that line. Basically, the line itself is beyond the 3 inch mark, okay? So if I make a cut and I go down the center of that line, the kerf, or the width of my cut, is going to actually take some material on this side and some material on that side, which means that the part I measured at 3 inches oh so carefully is now going to be short. Might only be a 1/16 of an inch short, might not even be that much, but it's going to be short. So ultimately what I want to do is I want to pick a side to cut. As a general rule, I'm going to cut on the scrap side of the line. If this was a circle, that I was cutting for a pipe penetration, even if, say, I trace the pipe, I want to cut on the inside of the line, okay, to get that hole to be that exact size. If I want a tiny amount of clearance so the pipe will slide through easily, maybe I do want to take the center of the line to make it slightly bigger. But be careful of which side of the line that you cut on. In this case right here, I'm going to call this the side I keep, and I'm going to call this the side I scrap, and I'm going to cut on the scrap side of the line and see if I can't maintain the 3 inches. You should be able to see that line with your face shield down and be able to save the 3-inch part. So let's take a peek. All right, we're going to go ahead and light the torch and we're going to make this cut. In this case, I'm going to cut out into the scrap because I know it's scrap. I'm going to approach the line. I'm not going to start right here. I want to keep that line nice and clear. If I was cutting inside of a hole, again, I would start here and work out to the line and do the same thing. Start to cut on the garbage. Now I can come out to the line and then I can just lightly follow it. So you can see that I'm staying on the outside edge of the line, or at least I'm trying to. I'm going to let the part fall. So again, the trick is recognizing that one piece is usually scrap, one piece we're saving. I made the cut out on the scrap. I let that get orange. I came back into the line and I made my cut. Okay? By doing that, that means that this piece should still hopefully be 3 inches. It's a little too hot for me to just pick up and handle and measure, so I'm going to remove the weight. With the magic of camera, we'll let some time pass, and I'll be back. I know that was pretty lame. Okay, but I'm back. Basically what I have right now is I have a piece that I can measure, and again, I've got my 3 inches. I might have a whisker extra. It is not a, that's pretty damn close. But I'm definitely not short. So at this point, I could grind that edge, I could dress it up, and it can make the part usable. Once it's short, it's awful hard to make it long. So you have to basically start with the part long and then grind it a little bit shorter. But always keep that in mind when you're doing your cutting. Again, if you're just making practice cuts, doesn't really matter. But again, you will be better off in the long run while you're doing your practice to make a line with a soapstone. Pick one side to be good, one side to be scrap, and follow it, okay? That having been said, that is Oxy-Fuel cutting. There's probably more detailed things that we could talk about. Maybe we'll do another video down the road, but that should at least get you started with the basic things that we're going to do here in school. Straight cuts, adjusting the torch, properly, beveled cuts, how to pierce through material, and consciously thinking about which side of the line am I going to cut, what am I going to keep, what am I going to scrap. All right, that's it.